year is it? 2014 already? I'm 22. Man, time goes by fast. Seems like just yesterday I was planning my schedule around a tiny group of friends because we all had nerdy mutual interests. Back then, gaming was geeky and weird, and I had to know the right people in order to really connect over video games. Fast forward almost a decade and gaming is huge. Mountain Dew and Doritos aside, the market's absolutely booming, and the sales of consoles and games are constantly on the rise. With that notion, everybody's looking to get a piece of the pie. Indies and everybody else are flexing their artistic muscles and pushing out games faster than Let's Players can yell obscenities at them. Some are in it for expression, others are in it to make a quick buck, and a few are in it to make the absolute quickest buck that they can possibly get away with. As the market and the medium grows, devs are always on the move trying to make their games stand out from the ever-bloating competition. The way most everybody is taking is to pack it with more content. Fill it with content, you know, branching paths, a bigger world, more weapons. Call it a roguelike. That one always works. This content is really just that, content. And it's not fun, it's not art, it's not interesting, it just is. Jonathan Blow once said that he didn't like the word content because it cheapened a game's inner workings. Nobody ever said, hey, do you want to go down to a fine restaurant and eat some content? And I think that's a good way to look at it. Despite this trend, sometimes you'll find a game that picks just one particular thing and really nails it. As can be seen with the ever-popular Portal, Valve took the idea of traveling around with portals and completing puzzles, and then they sanded off all the mediocre bits and polished up the finished product. And what they delivered was a game that can only be described as a timeless puzzle game. This is the part where I mentioned Nidhogg. I mean, it's what the video is about, so it was going to come up eventually. After a development that spanned multiple years, this game finally saw the light of day on January 13th, 2014 on Steam. Nidhogg is a two-dimensional fighting game revolving around fencing combat created by Mark Messhoff-Essen. At a glance, it's easy to say things like retro bandwagon and pretentious art project, but please, just put all that aside for a moment. I promise, Nidhogg is far beyond all that. The fighting game industry isn't one that's often touched by indies. You'll see a lot of RPGs, puzzle platformers, and the like, but a true indie fighting game is a rarity. Over the past couple of years, we saw titles like Skullgirls and Divekick as attempts to break into the fighting game scene with all of the personal flourish that an independent developer can provide. Skullgirls is a more traditional fighter with many combos to learn and matchups to analyze, while Divekick shot for utter simplicity in 2-button controls and almost binary combat. I'm not a huge fighter fan, and both of these games quickly came and went for me. The former simply reminding me that I still suck at Street Fighter, and the latter pretty much boring me to death. Nidhogg is the perfect middle ground. Simplicity at its best, a delicate balancing act played out by 2 neon pixelmen and a whole lot of IRL yelling. So what is it that sets this one above the rest? The gameplay of Nidhogg lies on a very simple concept. 2 fighters duel each other in the standoff to start a match. The winner gets the arrow and is allowed to try and make progress forward. The object is to win duels and advance to the end of the screen. There are multiple screens in each arena with different layouts and terrain. Upon death, the living player gets a short time to advance forward before their opponent respawns in their way to stop progress. The first thing that struck me about Nidhogg was the pacing. Everything happens very quick and frantically. Movement is fast and inputs fly from the controller to the screen fluidly. It's clear that this game is meant to be able to be played on a whim with minimal setup. Matches last a few minutes on average, but lengthen depending on the skill of the participants, making casual play quick and fun while keeping competitive matches tense. The controls are absolutely solid. After going through the how to play section to be shown the basics, I was pretty quickly able to pick up on some of the more interesting inputs like cartwheels, rolling, and wall jumping. Every button press feels good, the button mapping is great, and in no time I was feeling confident with doing advanced maneuvers. That feeling is a huge factor here. Not only do the controls feel great, the whole game does. Sound effects are snappy and on point, and every action has the perfect amount of friction to make things feel familiar, as if the on-screen character is just an extension of your hands. When you curl up and roll for a moment, the skid is practically tangible. It makes judging your character's actions and limits second nature. Actions in Nidhogg are at the midpoint of varied and limited. Certain moves have the edge over other ones, and knowing what to use and when is key to competitive play. For example, when playing the single player mode, I noticed that if I jumped over my opponent a lot, they would learn and start using the sword throw behind them to catch me while I was vulnerable. If I would initiate a duel by running and rolling up to them, they would shift their focus to keeping their sword low as a counter. That subtle play forced me to keep shifting my own tactics in order to stay ahead of them. Sword duels are one of the most intense elements in Nidhogg. The idea is that you can hold your saber at 3 different heights while pointed forward, and moving it up and down parries an attack at that same height. Moving your sword into an opponent's stab will disarm them, but since everything happens so quick, instead of a simple 1-2 motion, it often ends up looking like this. It's almost like a spiderweb of rock, paper, scissors mechanics, complex enough to promote on-the-fly strategic plays, but not complex to the point of being overwhelming. Against a human opponent is where all of these things come together and blossom into a full-fledged fighting game. The AI is fun to fight, but the mind games of crossing swords with another person turn everything up to a whole other level. Mind games like crouch jumping. Nothing is more confusing than forcing your opponent to make a move by crouch jumping. I can try and fight, or I can just wait for you to mess up while I bounce around in a ball. The matchmaking isn't perfect, along with the private servers, which is understandable for a new indie title, but Nidhogg highly promotes the 2-player local multiplayer as its primary mode. Sitting down next to a friend as you frantically mash keys and buttons to outmaneuver them has never been so fun, and it really brought me back to the glory days of the SNES without feeling like Nidhogg was trying to ride on the coattails of a past era. And in full circle fashion, that brings me back to the visuals. At a glance, it almost seems like this game belongs in the Atari 2600, but the design choice of low-res graphics is more than just retro nostalgia. It makes the gameplay that much more solid. Surfaces you can move on are clear and easy to spot, while subtle art conceals interactive objects in the background like windows and doors. Every level has different quirks and graphic choices to alter the gameplay style. For example, the middle screen on the level Clouds has a bright, pulsating background that can make sword throws almost impossible to spot. Mines has 2 hallway sections that deter the player from jumping or dodging, forcing a straight-up sword fight. These level design choices are solid and fairly easy to spot thanks to the art style. There are so many details to gush over, like the blood splatters and the color of your character that mark when you've died, the waterfall in the background of Wilds, the list goes on and on. Capping off everything is the short but sweet soundtrack. Composed by electronic producer Daedalus, these tracks amp up the energy in each level. The unique theme of each track perfectly matches the visuals without being a typical representation of a castle or mines. They're unique and familiar at the same time, which in hindsight really reflects the whole game. Nidhogg is really one of those indie gems that doesn't require you to sink your life into it or bend your intellect to really get it. It's tons of fun, it's fast-paced, it's a blast to play alone or with friends. Nidhogg is currently available on Steam for $15, and though that seems a bit steep to some people, I would definitely recommend giving it a try. You might be surprised with how much you enjoy it. If you want to win your own copy of Nidhogg, head over to Twitter and share this video. Make sure you tag me at SunderCR and include the hashtag CrouchJump. And on February 1st, you may be randomly selected to get a free copy on Steam. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any more of my videos in the future. If you want to see more, check out my LEGO Rock Raiders review right over here. This has been Sunder, and I'll see you next time.